Jack Sullivan had 18 minutes to reach the interview that would save his daughter's future. His knuckles whitened against the steering wheel of the 2008 Honda Civic as Morrison Bridge traffic congealed into an unmoving mass of metal and exhaust. 8 months. 14 rejection letters. Sophie needed new shoes, but his checking account showed $47, and the rent notice taped to their apartment door gave them until Friday. This was the last chance. His phone vibrated against the passenger seat. Sophie's school. Third call in 20 minutes. He jabbed the decline button without looking. Whatever crisis had erupted in 4th grade would have to wait. Everything had to wait for Wade Industries, for the operations manager position that paid $85,000 and came with health insurance and the kind of stability that let 9-year-old girls sleep without wondering if tomorrow meant another new school in another cheaper neighborhood. Rain hammered the windshield. The wipers scraped across glass in mechanical desperation. Through the cleared arc, he watched the dashboard clock. 10:43. The interview letter had been explicit about punctuality. Arrival time reflects character and professional commitment. He'd set 3 alarms, laid out his only suit the night before, skipped breakfast to leave an hour early. He'd done everything right, and the universe had responded with gridlock. Ahead, movement caught his eye. A woman in a charcoal business suit stepped from a black Mercedes S-Class, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing with her free hand in obvious frustration. The car probably cost more than Jack had earned in the past 3 years combined. She paced beside her open door, heels clicking on wet pavement, completely absorbed in whatever corporate emergency demanded immediate resolution. Jack's phone buzzed again. Still the school. He sent it to voicemail and felt the familiar twist of guilt that came with being a single parent who had to prioritize survival over availability. Sophie would understand. She always understood, which somehow made it worse. The woman ahead was still on her phone, still pacing. Even from this distance, Jack could read the tension in her shoulders, the sharp movements that spoke of someone accustomed to problems that solved themselves when she demanded it. She probably had assistants to call when traffic made her late, probably had a dozen job offers waiting, probably didn't know what it felt like to count pennies for school lunch money or explain to a child why they were moving again. Thunder rolled overhead and the rain intensified. Through the deluge, Jack saw traffic ahead begin to shift, not moving forward, but adjusting, compressing as drivers tried to navigate around whatever obstacle had created this nightmare. Maybe if the jam broke in the next few minutes, he could still make it. Call from the parking garage, explain about the bridge, beg for 5 minutes of their time. The truck appeared without warning. Later, Jack would replay this moment countless times, trying to understand how he'd known. Maybe it was the sound, that diesel roar building too fast behind the white noise of rain. Maybe it was the way other drivers suddenly went still, that animal awareness of danger that predates language. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he'd just looked up at exactly the wrong moment and seen what was about to happen with the clarity of inevitability. The 18-wheeler had been in the right lane, boxed in by gridlock like everyone else. But its driver had decided to use the shoulder to bypass the jam, building speed on that narrow strip meant for emergencies. 40 miles per hour. 50. The massive vehicle fishtailed slightly as it hit standing water, but the driver didn't slow. Couldn't slow, Jack realized. The truck was too heavy, moving too fast, and the rain had turned the shoulder into something between pavement and ice. And directly in its path, still standing beside her open car door with phone pressed to her ear and eyes on the traffic ahead, stood the woman in the charcoal suit. Jack's hand hit the door handle before conscious thought caught up. Sophie's face flashed through his mind. 9 years old, with her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin. What happened to her if he didn't come home? Who would make sure she ate breakfast and checked her homework and knew she was loved? But if he let this woman die, what did that teach Sophie about the kind of person her father was? That jobs mattered more than lives? That desperation was an excuse to walk past someone in trouble? Some choices don't wait for permission. Jack threw the door open and ran. 50 feet became 50 miles. Rain slapped his face, immediately soaking through the $89 suit from Goodwill that he'd bought on credit 2 weeks ago. The one that had felt like armor this morning and now clung to him like a drowning man's last breath. His dress shoes, purchased at the same thrift store and shined to hopeful gleam, slipped on wet pavement. He caught himself, kept running, aware of nothing but the woman ahead and the truck bearing down with the inevitability of mathematics. She still hadn't seen it. Still had her back turned, phone to ear, probably arguing with someone about this delay, about time that belonged to her and was being stolen by lesser mortals who couldn't keep traffic moving. The truck was 30 feet away. 20. Its horn blared, a sound like the end of the world, and finally, the woman turned. Jack saw her face in that moment, saw realization hit, saw her body begin the too slow process of trying to move while knowing it wouldn't be enough. He hit her like a linebacker, arms wrapping around her waist, momentum carrying them both away from the Mercedes and into the lane of stopped traffic. They went down hard. Jack twisted at the last second to take the impact on his shoulder. Pain exploded through his body as they hit pavement, skidding several feet on the rain-slick street. The truck roared past where she'd been standing, close enough that Jack felt displaced air slap against his back. Metal shrieked as it clipped the Mercedes' open door, tearing it from its hinges and sending it spinning across 3 lanes like a playing card tossed by a giant's hand. The door hit someone's Camry with a sound like a bomb going off. The truck kept going, fishtailing wildly now, its driver fighting for control. Then, somehow, silence. Not real silence. Car alarms screamed, people shouted, the truck's engine still growled in the distance. But the silence of stopped time, of a moment stretched so thin it became transparent. Jack lay on wet pavement, the woman partially beneath him, both of them breathing in ragged gasps that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with the sudden violent understanding that they were alive. His shoulder felt wrong, a wrongness that went deeper than pain. The woman pushed herself up on her elbows. Jack rolled aside to give her space. She stared at him with wide eyes. Green eyes, he noticed randomly. Green like bottle glass held up to sunlight. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever professional arrangement it had been in, and rain plastered it to her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You," she managed. "That truck." "Yeah." Jack sat up slowly, testing his body for damage. His shoulder screamed protest. His ribs didn't feel much better. When he touched his face, his hand came away red. "Yeah, that was close." People were getting out of their cars now, converging on them with that peculiar mix of concern and curiosity that accidents inspire. Someone was already on their phone calling 911. Someone else had their camera out, because of course they did. Jack had a dizzy thought about going viral, about Sophie seeing her father tackle a stranger on a bridge, and almost laughed. "Don't move!" A man in a construction vest knelt beside them. "Ambulance is coming." "Jesus, I saw the whole thing. You didn't even hesitate." Jack looked down at his suit. The left shoulder was shredded, dark with blood and rain. His pants had torn at the knee, and through the gap he could see an ugly abrasion forming. The shoes were ruined, both of them, the thrift store leather scuffed beyond any polish's ability to hide. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Somehow it had survived the impact. He pulled it out with a hand that shook slightly and saw the notification. One missed call from Wade Industries. Then, as he watched, a voicemail indicator appeared. 10:52 a.m. He'd missed it. After everything, the months of searching, the careful budgeting to afford the suit, the practiced answers to anticipated questions, the hope he'd barely let himself feel, he'd missed it. "Sir, you're bleeding pretty badly." A woman in scrubs had appeared, apparently a nurse or doctor stopped in the same traffic. She was examining his shoulder with professional concern. "That truck's side mirror caught you when it went past. You're going to need stitches." "I'm fine," Jack said automatically, then realized how stupid that sounded. He wasn't fine. He was bleeding on a bridge in a ruined suit with a shoulder that wouldn't move right and an interview he'd never make. I have to call." "You need to sit still," the nurse said firmly. "You just saved this woman's life. The least you can do is let us make sure you didn't trade yours for it." The woman in the charcoal suit was being helped to her feet by the construction worker. She stood unsteadily, looking down at Jack with an expression he couldn't quite read. Shock, probably. Gratitude. Maybe a little residual fear. She opened her mouth, clearly wanting to say something, but sirens cut through the air before she could find the words. Police arrived first. 3 cruisers that somehow navigated through the gridlocked traffic with practiced efficiency. Then an ambulance. Then another. Jack found himself surrounded by EMTs asking questions he answered on autopilot while his mind churned through calculations. How long until they let him leave? Could he still call Wade Industries? Would they even care that he'd been in an accident? Or would they simply move on to the next desperate candidate? "We need to transport both of you," one of the EMTs was saying. "Get you checked out properly. That shoulder needs immediate attention. And ma'am, we should run a full assessment." "No." The woman's voice was stronger now, carrying an edge of authority that made the EMT pause. "I'm fine. I wasn't injured. He took the impact." She looked at Jack, and something in her expression shifted. "What's your name?" "Jack. Jack Sullivan." "Mr. Sullivan." She said it like she was testing the weight of it. "I'm Catherine Wade." For a moment, the name didn't register. Then it hit him with the force of the truck he'd just dodged. Catherine Wade, CEO of Wade Industries, the woman whose company he was supposed to be interviewing with right now, the woman whose HR department had sent him that rejection letter 8 months ago, and whose executive team had inexplicably called him back 2 weeks ago with a second chance. He'd just saved the CEO's life, and in the process, destroyed his only opportunity to work for her company. "Oh," Jack said, then couldn't think of anything else to say. "Oh." Catherine Wade was staring at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. One of her assistants, because of course she had an assistant somewhere nearby, had appeared with a jacket to replace her ruined suit coat. A police officer was trying to guide her toward a waiting cruiser, but she waved them all away, her focus entirely on Jack. "You were going somewhere," she said. It wasn't a question. "The way you looked at your phone before you ran, you were late for something important." "It doesn't matter now." "It clearly does." She glanced at the officer. "Give us a moment." Then to Jack. "Where were you going?" He almost laughed. The absurdity of it, sitting on Morrison Bridge in a shredded suit, bleeding from a shoulder wound, explaining to Catherine Wade that he'd been rushing to interview for her company. But when he opened his mouth, what came out was simpler. "I had a job interview. Operations manager position at Wade Industries. 10:30 appointment." He pulled out his phone and showed her the email, somehow needing her to see proof that he wasn't making this up. I left an hour early, but the traffic. He gestured at the gridlocked bridge, the statement finishing itself. Catherine took the phone, reading the email with an expression that shifted through several emotions too quickly for Jack to track. When she looked up, something had changed in her face. "You are coming to interview with my company." "Yes." "And when you saw someone in danger, a complete stranger, you abandoned that interview to help them." Jack shrugged, then immediately regretted it as pain shot through his shoulder. "Wasn't much of a choice. The interview would have been pointless if someone died because I wanted to be on time. Most people would have called 911 and kept driving." "Maybe." Jack took his phone back, looking at the cracked screen. Another expense he couldn't afford. "But I've got a daughter. I'd want someone to do the same for her if she needed it." Something shifted in Catherine's expression. She turned to the police officer who'd been waiting patiently. "I need details about the truck driver. Full investigation. That was criminal negligence at minimum." "Yes, ma'am. We've got units pursuing the vehicle now." "Good." She turned back to Jack. "And I need you to tell these EMTs which hospital they're taking you to. I'll meet you there." "Ma'am, I don't think—" one of the EMTs started. "Not a request." Catherine's voice carried the unmistakable weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Mr. Sullivan saved my life. The least I can do is ensure he receives the best possible care." She paused, a slight smile touching her lips. "Besides, he has an interview to complete. I think we can make an exception to the tardiness policy." Jack stared at her. "What?" "You missed your scheduled interview because you were saving my life." "I think we can make an exception to the tardiness policy." She gestured to the EMTs. "Let them transport you. Get that shoulder treated. I'll have my assistant reschedule you for this afternoon." "Miss Wade, I don't— This isn't necessary." "Mr. Sullivan." She crouched down so they were at eye level, and Jack saw something in her face that went beyond gratitude. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. "In the last 10 minutes, you've shown me more about your character than any interview could have revealed. You made a choice that cost you everything. Or so you thought. You prioritized a stranger's life over your own future without hesitation. That's not something I see every day." She stood. "So yes, this is absolutely necessary. I want to know more about the man who runs into traffic instead of away from it." The EMTs were preparing a stretcher. Jack let them help him onto it, his mind still struggling to process what was happening. This morning, he'd been invisible. Another desperate single parent, another resume in a stack, another person the world looked past. Now he was being loaded into an ambulance while the CEO of a major corporation promised him an interview anyway. As they lifted the stretcher, he caught a glimpse of his Honda still sitting in traffic, door hanging open, hazard lights flashing. Everything he owned that mattered was in that car. Sophie's school enrollment papers, the folder of his professional certificates, the printed directions to Wade Industries. "My car," he said. "I need to—" "I'll have someone deal with it," Catherine said. She was walking alongside the stretcher, her assistant scrambling to keep up while talking rapid fire into a phone. "Focus on getting patched up. We'll handle the rest." The ambulance doors closed, and through the small window, Jack watched the bridge scene recede. Police were redirecting traffic. Tow trucks were arriving for the Mercedes and the vehicles damaged by the flying door. The truck was probably miles away by now, its driver either unaware of what had almost happened or choosing to run rather than face consequences. The EMT examining his shoulder was saying something about tissue damage and possible ligament tears. Jack heard the words, but couldn't quite make them feel real. None of this felt real. Less than 15 minutes ago, his biggest fear had been missing an interview. Now that same interview was somehow still happening. His body was a map of fresh injuries, and Catherine Wade was personally ensuring he received care. His phone buzzed. Sophie's school. 4th call. He answered it this time. "Mr. Sullivan?" The voice was familiar. Mrs. Davidson, the school secretary. "We've been trying to reach you. Sophie got into an incident during recess. She's fine, but we need you to come pick her up." "What kind of incident?" "Some other students were teasing her and she pushed one of them. We have a strict no violence policy and—" "I understand." Jack closed his eyes, feeling the weight of too many problems trying to solve themselves simultaneously. "I'm actually in an ambulance right now. There was an accident on the bridge. Can she stay in the office until I can arrange pickup?" Silence on the other end, then, "An ambulance? Mr. Sullivan, are you all right?" "I will be. Just need some stitches. But I can't get there for at least an hour, maybe 2. Is there any way—" Of course. Sophie can stay with me. Should I call someone else? Family?" "There isn't anyone else." The words came out harder than he intended. "It's just me and her. I'll get there as soon as the hospital releases me." He ended the call and stared at the ambulance ceiling. Perfect. Just perfect. His daughter was in trouble at school. He was bleeding in an ambulance. His car was abandoned on a bridge. And his interview, his impossible, surreal, second-chance interview, was apparently still happening. The EMT was asking about his medical history. Jack answered mechanically. No major illnesses, no chronic conditions, no regular medications, no insurance. No insurance? The EMT paused. "Sir, this hospital visit is going to be expensive. Emergency transport, stitches, possibly imaging for that shoulder. I'll figure it out." Jack had been figuring it out for 3 years now, ever since Sophie's mother had decided being a parent was too complicated and left them both behind. He figured out child care and school lunches and rent and utilities and groceries and birthday presents and everything else that came with raising a child alone. He'd figure out one more bill. They arrived at Providence Memorial 15 minutes later. The hospital was familiar. Jack had brought Sophie here twice for emergencies, once for a broken wrist, once for a severe asthma attack. Both times, the bills had taken months to pay down. This time would probably be worse. But as they wheeled him through the emergency room entrance, someone was already waiting. A woman in a crisp business suit, tablet in hand, approached with purposeful efficiency. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm Jennifer Miller, Mrs. Wade's executive assistant. She's asked me to ensure you receive the best possible care." Jennifer handed something to the registration nurse. "All expenses are covered by Wade Industries, whatever he needs." The nurse looked at the card Jennifer had provided, then at Jack with new interest. "Right away, Miss Miller. We'll get him into a treatment room immediately." "Wait." Jack tried to sit up on the gurney. "I can't let your company pay for this. It's too much." Jennifer smiled. It was a professional smile, polite but firm. "Miss Wade was quite clear about this, Mr. Sullivan. You saved her life. This is the absolute minimum we can do in return. Please don't argue. You'll lose." She wasn't wrong. Within minutes, Jack found himself in a private treatment room with a doctor examining his shoulder and a nurse cleaning the various cuts and abrasions that covered his face and arms. The doctor ordered X-rays, then an MRI to rule out ligament damage. Everything moved with swift efficiency that came from knowing someone important was paying attention. 45 minutes later, Jack had 12 stitches in his shoulder, another 8 across his forehead, and a diagnosis of severe bruising but no permanent damage. The doctor prescribed pain medication and rest, both of which seemed laughable. Rest wasn't an option when you had a 9-year-old who needed picking up from school and bills that wouldn't pay themselves. He was trying to figure out how to get to Sophie when Jennifer reappeared. "Ms. Wade is waiting in a conference room upstairs. If you're feeling up to it, she'd like to conduct your interview now." Jack looked down at himself. His suit was destroyed. His face was bandaged. And he probably looked like he'd lost a fight with a concrete mixer. "I'm not exactly interview ready. Ms. Wade is aware of your condition. She'd still like to speak with you." Jennifer paused. "And she's also arranged for a driver to pick up your daughter from school and bring her here. Sophie, correct? 9 years old?" "How did she—" Jack stopped. Of course Catherine Wade knew about Sophie. She'd probably had someone pull his entire background while he was being stitched up. Did Sophie's school agree to that? Ms. Wade spoke with the principal personally. Of course she had. Jack followed Jennifer through the hospital corridors, his mind struggling to keep up with how quickly everything had changed. This morning, he'd been invisible. Another struggling single parent, another resume in a stack, another person the world looked past. Now he was being escorted through a hospital by an executive assistant while the CEO of a major corporation waited to interview him. The conference room was small but private, with a window overlooking the hospital's courtyard. Catherine Wade sat at the table, still in her rain-damp business suit, a laptop open in front of her. She looked up as Jack entered, and that same assessing look from the bridge crossed her face. "Mr. Sullivan, please sit." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Jennifer, can you give us some privacy?" Jennifer nodded and slipped out, closing the door behind her. For a long moment, Catherine just looked at him. Jack resisted the urge to fidget, to explain, to fill the silence with words that would only make him sound more desperate. Let her look. Let her see what she'd see. "Tell me about your daughter," Catherine said finally. Of all the questions Jack had prepared for, this wasn't one of them. "Sophie. She's 9. Smart, funny, stubborn as hell." He smiled despite himself. "Looks just like her mother, but has my terrible sense of humor." "And her mother?" "Gone. Left when Sophie was 6. Decided parenting wasn't what she'd signed up for." Jack kept his voice neutral. He'd learned not to let the bitterness show. "Been just the two of us since then." "That must be difficult." "It's life. You do what needs doing." Catherine nodded slowly. "Your resume indicates you have a degree in operations management from Portland State. Top of your class. Letters of recommendation from 3 previous supervisors, all glowing. 5 years of progressively responsible positions at Riverside Manufacturing before they closed their Portland facility. Yet you've been unemployed for 8 months. Why?" Here it was. The question he'd been dreading. The gap he couldn't explain without sounding like he was making excuses. But after saving this woman's life, lying seemed pointless. "Because I need flexible hours. I need to be able to pick Sophie up from school. I need to be available when she's sick. I need to put her first." And most companies see that as a liability. He met Catherine's eyes. "So I kept applying anyway, taking rejection after rejection, because what else could I do? Give up? Let us end up homeless? I've got a kid depending on me. That means you keep trying, even when it's pointless." "And today, running into traffic, that was also for Sophie?" "No," Jack shook his head. "That was just, you were in danger. Someone needed help. The interview mattered, but not more than a life." "Even though that interview represented everything you needed?" "Especially because of that." Jack leaned forward, ignoring his protesting ribs. Ms. Wade, I can't teach my daughter that success matters more than doing the right thing. I can't show her that desperation is an excuse for walking past someone in trouble. She's watching everything I do, learning what kind of person to become. If I'd driven past you today, I'd have made it to this interview, and I'd have failed it anyway, because I'd have known exactly what kind of man I'd become. Catherine was quiet for a long time. Then she stood, walking to the window. Rain still fell across the courtyard, lighter now, but persistent. My father built Wade Industries from nothing, she said. Started as a small manufacturing operation in a garage, grew it into a multinational corporation through hard work and smart decisions. When he died 6 years ago, I inherited everything. The company, the responsibility, the pressure to maintain what he'd built. She turned back to Jack. Do you know what he told me before he died? Jack shook his head. He said that character is the only thing you can't fake. Skills can be learned, experience can be gained, but integrity, real integrity, is either there or it isn't. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was also dying, which gave him clarity most of us don't have until it's too late. Catherine returned to her seat. 6 years ago, my brother Michael died in an industrial accident at one of our facilities in Nevada. Her voice was flat, carefully controlled. Equipment failed. Maintenance had been deferred because of production targets. Management ignored worker concerns. Michael was there visiting, learning the operations from the ground up like our father wanted. He died because someone decided quarterly profits mattered more than proper maintenance. Jack felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. I'm sorry. The board wanted me to close that facility, consolidate production, cut the underperforming asset. Catherine's eyes met his. But closing it meant 300 workers losing their jobs, meant admitting Michael's death was meaningless. So I fought to keep it open, implemented reforms, tried to make it right. But I didn't know how. I know strategy, finance, board politics. I don't know how to fix a place that's been broken from the inside out. She paused. Until this morning, on that bridge. In those seconds, you demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and character I need in my leadership team. Someone who makes the hard choice, even when it costs them everything. I'm going to offer you the operations manager position, but not because you saved my life. I'm offering it because in a crisis, you made a choice that revealed your character. That kind of integrity is rare. I need it on my team. And I won't let anyone drive you away. Jack couldn't speak. The salary is $85,000 as posted. Benefits include full health insurance, retirement matching, and flexible scheduling to accommodate Sophie's needs. Catherine pulled out a tablet and tapped a few keys. You'll start Monday, 4 days from now. Jennifer will handle all the paperwork and help you find childcare options near our office. Any questions? I don't understand. You haven't asked me anything about operations management, process improvement, supply chain logistics, any of the actual job requirements. I've read your resume. Your previous supervisors all say you're exceptional at the technical aspects of the work. What I needed to know was whether you're exceptional as a person. You answered that question on a bridge in the rain. The rest is just details. She stood, extending her hand. Welcome to Wade Industries, Mr. Sullivan. Try not to save my life again. I prefer to keep the heroics to a minimum going forward. Jack stood and shook her hand, his grip firm despite the pain in his shoulder. I'll do my best, ma'am. Catherine. Call me Catherine. We're going to be working closely together, and I prefer to keep things relatively informal with my senior team. The door opened, and Jennifer appeared with a small figure behind her. Sophie, her dark hair in the messy ponytails she always insisted on doing herself, her school backpack dragging behind her. She saw Jack, and her face crumpled. "Daddy!" She ran across the room and threw herself at him. Jack caught her, biting back a gasp as the impact jarred his injured shoulder. "Hey, baby, I'm okay. Just a few scratches." "The lady said you were in an accident. She said you saved someone." Sophie pulled back to look at him, her eyes wide. "Is that true?" "Yeah, sweetheart. Someone needed help, so I helped them." Sophie looked past him to Catherine. "Was it you? Did my dad save you?" Catherine knelt down so she was at Sophie's eye level. "He did. Your father is a very brave man." "I know." Sophie said it with the absolute certainty of a 9-year-old who had never doubted her parent. "He's the best dad ever. Even when other kids say mean things about us, he's still the best." Something shifted in Catherine's expression. "What kind of mean things?" Sophie shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable. "Just stuff about how we don't have a lot of money, about how we've moved a lot, about my mom not being around. But Daddy says people who judge others without knowing their story aren't worth listening to." "Your daddy is very right." Catherine stood, and when she looked at Jack again, there was something new in her eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or solidarity. "Sophie, how would you like to see where your dad is going to be working? We have a really amazing cafeteria with ice cream." Sophie's face lit up. "Really? Daddy, can we?" Jack opened his mouth to protest. He was bandaged, exhausted, and had just accepted a job he still wasn't entirely sure was real. But Catherine was already heading for the door, and Sophie was tugging at his hand with that unstoppable enthusiasm children deploy when ice cream is mentioned. "Come on," Catherine said. "Let me show you both what you've just become a part of." They left the hospital in Catherine's car, a different Mercedes provided by her security team after the bridge incident. The driver was professional and silent, navigating through afternoon traffic with practiced efficiency. Sophie pressed her nose to the window, pointing out landmarks she recognized, her earlier troubles at school apparently forgotten. Wade Industries' headquarters was a gleaming structure of glass and steel in Portland's downtown district. As they pulled into the underground garage, Jack felt that familiar twist of inadequacy. This was where he'd be working. This temple of corporate success where his ruined Goodwill suit and battered Honda would stand out like graffiti on a cathedral wall. "Stop that," Catherine said quietly. Jack looked at her, startled. "Stop what?" "Whatever you're thinking right now. That you don't belong here. That you're not good enough." She waited until he met her eyes. "You just proved you are exactly the kind of person who belongs here. Don't let imposter syndrome steal what you've earned." They took a private elevator to the top floor. The executive level was all open spaces and modern furniture with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city. Employees they passed did double takes at seeing their CEO in rain-damaged clothes with bandages on her face, escorting a similarly disheveled stranger and a 9-year-old girl. The cafeteria Catherine led them to was indeed impressive, more like a high-end restaurant than a workplace dining area. Sophie's eyes went wide at the ice cream bar, and Jack found himself nodding permission before she even asked. While Sophie loaded a bowl with enough ice cream to constitute a meal, Catherine guided Jack to a quiet table by the windows. "You're going to face resistance," she said without preamble. "Some of my senior managers have been here for decades. They're not going to understand why I hired someone directly, especially not someone who's been out of work for 8 months. They'll question your qualifications, your experience, your right to be here. They'll test you, try to make you fail, hope you'll quit so they can say, I made a mistake. I know. Do you? Catherine leaned forward. I'm not talking about casual skepticism. I'm talking about active sabotage. People protecting their territories, their positions. They'll test you, try to make you fail, hope you'll quit so they can say, I made a mistake. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't make mistakes with hiring decisions, and I need you to remember that when things get difficult. Catherine's voice was firm. You saved my life today, yes, but I'm not hiring you out of gratitude. I'm hiring you because in a crisis, you made a choice that revealed your character. That kind of integrity is rare. I need it on my team, and I won't let anyone drive you away. Sophie returned with her ice cream bowl, climbing into the chair next to Jack. She took a huge bite and immediately winced. Brain freeze! Jack couldn't help but smile. That's what happens when you eat it too fast, baby. But it's so good. Sophie took another, slightly smaller bite. Miss Catherine, thank you for this, and for giving my daddy a job. He's been really worried about money. Sophie, Jack started, embarrassed. It's okay, Daddy. Miss Catherine already knows. She probably knows everything. Sophie looked at Catherine with that uncanny perception children sometimes have. You're going to take care of my daddy at work, right? Make sure people are nice to him? I'm going to make sure your daddy has every opportunity to succeed. But he's going to take care of himself, and probably a lot of other people too. That's who he is. Yeah, Sophie nodded, completely satisfied with this answer. That's who he is. They sat together as afternoon faded toward evening, an unlikely trio brought together by chance and crisis. Outside the windows, Portland stretched away in every direction, rain-washed and gleaming. Somewhere out there was Jack's abandoned Honda. Somewhere was the apartment they'd probably have to leave soon. Somewhere was the future he'd thought was lost this morning on the bridge. But here, in this moment, Jack felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Possibility. Not certainty. He wasn't naive enough to think this job would solve everything. But possibility was enough. Possibility was what you built from when everything else was gone. His phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. All paperwork ready for Monday. You're officially in the system. Welcome to Wade Industries. Jack looked at Sophie, happily working through her mountain of ice cream. He looked at Catherine, already back on her phone, but still present, still here. He looked at his bandaged hands and thought about the choice he'd made on the bridge. Some choices cost everything. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they give you back more than you ever knew to ask for. The storm was ending. Through the cafeteria windows, Jack could see patches of blue breaking through the clouds. It felt like an omen, though he didn't believe in omens. He believed in showing up, in doing the work, in protecting the people who mattered and helping the ones who needed it. Everything else was just details. Sophie's voice pulled him back. Daddy, what are you thinking about? Jack smiled and ruffled her hair. Just thinking that maybe we're going to be okay, baby. Maybe we're finally going to be okay. Sophie grinned, her mouth ringed with chocolate ice cream. I already knew that. You're my dad. We're always okay. Catherine's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her expression tightened slightly. Idaho calling, she said quietly. There's a problem with the facility. Management is asking about someone coming to assess them. She looked at Jack, and in her eyes, He saw the challenge arriving sooner than expected. I was thinking starting Monday was too late. Idaho needs someone now. Can you be ready by Wednesday? Jack thought about Sophie, about the time he'd promised her, about the small apartment waiting for them. Then he thought about 230 workers in Idaho working with failing equipment while corrupt management stole from them. Yes, he said, I can be ready. Wednesday morning arrived with a kind of nervous energy that made coffee taste like metal. Jack stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 5:30, adjusting a tie borrowed from the Goodwill store manager who'd extended the kindness after hearing about the bridge. The suit was new, purchased with an advance Jennifer had quietly arranged, but it still felt like costume armor over skin that didn't quite fit the role yet. You look handsome, Daddy. Sophie appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, clutching the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 3. You're supposed to be sleeping, baby. I wanted to see you before your first day. She patted across the cold tile and wrapped her arms around his waist. Jack knelt down so they were eye level, recognizing the question for what it really was. Sophie asking if she should be scared. A little nervous, maybe, but that's normal when you start something new. It means you care about doing it right. Will the people there be nice to you? He thought about Catherine's warning, about the resistance she'd promised was coming. Some will be. Some might not be at first, but that's okay. We can't control how other people act, only how we respond. Sophie considered this with the seriousness she brought to important matters. Like when Brittany made fun of my shoes at school. Exactly like that. You held your head up and didn't let her make you feel small. Jack smoothed her hair back. That's what I'm going to do too. But you pushed her when she wouldn't stop. That's why I got in trouble. Her voice was quiet. I know, sweetheart. And we talked about that. Using our hands isn't the answer, even when we're frustrated. But standing up for yourself, that's always right. You just have to find better ways to do it. With words. With walking away. With telling a teacher. Jack kissed her forehead. The hard part is staying calm when someone's trying to make you angry. That takes more strength than pushing back. Will you stay calm today, even if people are mean? I'll do my best. He stood, checking his reflection one more time. The stitches on his forehead were still visible, dark threads against healing skin. His shoulder ached despite the pain medication. He looked like exactly what he was. Someone who'd been through something and was still standing. Now go back to bed. Mrs. Walsh is going to pick you up for school at 7:30. I like Mrs. Walsh. She let me have 2 cookies yesterday. Don't get used to it. 1 cookie is the rule. Sophie giggled and scampered back to her room. Jack listened to her feet pattering down the hallway, the sound of her door closing, and felt the weight of everything settle on his shoulders. This job wasn't just about him anymore. It was about proving to Sophie that hard work mattered, that integrity led somewhere, that the world occasionally rewarded doing the right thing. He couldn't afford to fail. The drive to Wade Industries took 40 minutes in early morning traffic. Jack's Honda made concerning noises that suggested expensive repairs in his near future, but he pushed the thought aside. One problem at a time. He'd learned that lesson well over the past 3 years. You couldn't fix everything at once, so you fixed what you could and accepted what you couldn't. The parking garage felt different in morning light, full of expensive cars that made his Honda look like it had wandered in from another decade. Jack found a spot in the back corner, as far from the entrance as possible, and sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. You can do this. You've done harder things. You've kept Sophie fed and housed and happy. This is just a job. But it wasn't just a job. and he knew it. This was stability, security, the ability to stop choosing between groceries and rent. This was everything he'd been fighting for since the day Sophie's mother had left them both behind. The elevator to the executive floor felt impossibly fast, his stomach dropping as they rose. When the doors opened, Jennifer was waiting, looking immaculate in a navy suit. "Mr. Sullivan, perfect timing. Let me show you to your office." She led him down a corridor lined with glass-walled spaces, each occupied by people already deep in work despite the early hours. "You'll be working primarily with our operations division, reporting directly to Miss Wade. Your team consists of 12 people across 3 departments: manufacturing oversight, supply chain logistics, and quality assurance." 12 people reporting to me. Jack had managed teams before, but never at this scale. "Initially, yes. Ms. Wade has plans to expand your scope once you're settled." Jennifer stopped at a corner office with windows overlooking the river. "This is yours." The space was larger than Jack's entire apartment. A desk of dark wood, chairs that looked like they cost more than his car, bookshelves waiting to be filled. Through the windows, Portland stretched away toward the mountains, morning light turning the river to molten gold. This can't be right. Operations managers don't get corner offices. Ms. Wade's operations managers do. Jennifer set a tablet on his desk. "Your login credentials, security access, and first week schedule are all here. You have a team meeting at 9, lunch with department heads at noon, and a one-on-one with Ms. Wade at 3. Questions?" "About 1,000, but I'll start with, where's the cafeteria?" Jennifer smiled. 6th floor. Coffee is free. Everything else is subsidized. Don't skip lunch. You'll need the energy. She paused at the door. "And Mr. Sullivan, most people here are good at their jobs, but not all of them are good people. Learn to tell the difference quickly." Then she was gone, leaving Jack alone in an office that felt like it belonged to someone else. He sat carefully in the chair. It was ergonomic, expensive, the kind that adjusted in 6 different directions, and looked at the empty bookshelves. 3 years ago, he'd had an office half this size at Riverside Manufacturing. He'd filled those shelves with industry manuals, process improvement texts, photos of Sophie at various ages. Then the plant had closed, and all of it had gone into boxes that eventually ended up in a storage unit he couldn't afford to maintain. He'd lost most of it when he'd missed 3 months of payments. Starting over meant rebuilding from nothing every time. His computer chimed. An email notification. The sender was someone named Marcus Foley, Senior VP of Operations. The subject line read, "Welcome to the team." Jack opened it, expecting a standard greeting. "Sullivan, heard you're the new operations manager. Interesting hire. Most people work their way up to positions like this over decades. You must have made quite an impression. Looking forward to seeing what you bring to the table. We have high standards here. Let's hope you can meet them. Marcus Foley, Senior VP of Operations." The message was polite on the surface, but carried an unmistakable edge. Jack had encountered men like Marcus before. Corporate veterans who viewed every newcomer as a threat or an incompetent until proven otherwise. Sometimes both. Another email arrived. This one from someone named Patricia Torres, inviting him to the 9 o'clock team meeting. Then another from Helen Pierce in Quality Assurance, asking if they could schedule time to discuss operational protocols. Then 3 more, each with that same careful politeness that masked judgment. By 8:30, Jack had received 14 emails, and maybe 5 of them felt genuinely welcoming. He spent the next 20 minutes reviewing the tablet Jennifer had left, memorizing names and titles, trying to understand the organizational structure he'd just been dropped into. Wade Industries was vast. Manufacturing facilities in 6 states, distribution networks spanning the country, thousands of employees depending on decisions made in this building. And now he was part of the machinery that kept it all moving. At 8:55, Jack made his way to conference room B, following the directions on his tablet. The room was already half full, with people who stopped talking the moment he entered. 12 faces turned toward him with expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. "You must be Sullivan." A man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit stood up. Marcus Foley. They'd exchanged emails. "Mr. Foley." Jack shook his hand, noting the grip that was just slightly too firm, the eye contact that lasted just slightly too long. Territory marking, pure and simple. "Call me Marcus. We're pretty informal here despite appearances." Marcus gestured to the empty seat at the head of the table. "That's your spot. Ms. Wade likes her managers to run their own meetings." Jack sat, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. "I appreciate everyone taking the time this morning. I know you're all busy, and I'm the new variable in your routines." "That's one way to put it." This from a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper suit. She didn't introduce herself, but her nameplate read Patricia Torres. "We're curious about your background, Mr. Sullivan. Your resume is impressive, but there's a significant gap. 8 months unemployment is unusual for someone at your level." "It is," Jack agreed. "I was laid off when Riverside Manufacturing closed their Portland facility. Finding work that accommodated single-parent scheduling was challenging." Single parent. Another man, younger, with a kind of haircut that cost $200. Marcus Webb, if Jack had his faces right. "That's going to be interesting in this role. Operations management isn't exactly 9 to 5. "I'm aware. I've worked out arrangements for my daughter's care." "Arrangements fail." This from Marcus, his tone conversational, but his meaning clear. "What happens when your daughter gets sick? When school calls? When your arrangements fall through and you need to leave in the middle of a crisis?" The room had gone very quiet. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It was a test. They wanted to see how he'd react to pressure, whether he'd defend himself or fold. Jack took a breath, thinking about what he'd told Sophie that morning. Stay calm. Use words. Don't let them make you angry. "You're right. Arrangements do fail. Emergencies happen. But they happen to everyone. Single parents, married parents, people without kids who have sick relatives or personal crises." He met Marcus's eyes. "What matters is how you handle it. Whether you communicate clearly, delegate effectively, and build systems that don't collapse when one person needs to step away. I've been managing crisis situations for 3 years while raising my daughter alone. If anything, that's made me better at contingency planning." "Contingency planning?" Patricia's voice was dry. "Is that what you call saving Ms. Wade's life? A contingency plan?" So they knew. Of course they knew. The story had probably spread through the building within hours of him being hired. "No. That was just doing what needed to be done in the moment." "And getting rewarded with a job you didn't interview for. Must be nice having a shortcut past the usual hiring process." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I did interview. In a hospital conference room while still bleeding from 12 stitches. It wasn't the traditional format, I'll grant you. But Ms. Wade asked her questions, and I gave my answers." "What did she ask?" Patricia's question came fast, like she was trying to catch him in a lie. "She asked about my daughter, about why I'd been unemployed, about the choice I made on the bridge." Jack held her gaze. "She wanted to know what kind of person I was under pressure. Turns out that matters more to her than whether I can recite supply chain optimization theory." "Does it?" Marcus's smile was thin. Well, let's hope character translates to competence, because this company runs on results, not good intentions. I'd expect nothing less. Jack pulled up a document on his tablet, which is why I spent the weekend reviewing last quarter's operations reports. I have questions about the variance in manufacturing throughput between our facilities. The Oregon plant is running at 92% efficiency, while Idaho is stuck at 78. That's a significant gap. The room shifted. Patricia and Marcus exchanged glances. Helen Pierce sat up straighter. You reviewed last quarter's reports. Patricia's tone had changed, surprise creeping through the skepticism. Those are dense documents. 300 pages of data. 347, actually. I read fast when it matters. Jack pulled up a chart. Idaho facilities' numbers have been declining for 6 months. Equipment failure rates are up. Worker satisfaction scores are down. And there's been a 23% increase in safety incidents. That suggests either poor management, inadequate maintenance, or both. Marcus's expression had gone carefully neutral. The Idaho situation is complicated. The facility manager retired last year, and we've been searching for a replacement. For a year? Jack didn't hide his disbelief. While efficiency dropped and people got hurt? That's not complicated. That's negligent. Silence crashed through the room like a physical force. No one spoke. No one moved. Jack realized he'd just called out senior leadership for what was essentially a failure, and he was barely 2 hours into his first day. But he'd also spent 3 years watching Sophie learn to stand up for herself, teaching her that speaking truth mattered even when it was uncomfortable. If he wanted her to believe that, he had to live it. You're not wrong. The voice came from the doorway. Catherine Wade stepped into the room, her presence immediately commanding attention. The Idaho situation is exactly what Mr. Sullivan described. Negligence dressed up as complexity, which is why he's going there next week to fix it. Catherine, I didn't realize you'd be joining us. Marcus stood. I wasn't planning to, but I wanted to see how Mr. Sullivan's first meeting went. Catherine's smile was pleasant, but her eyes were steel. Sounds like he's already identified problems some of you have been ignoring for months. We've been aware of Idaho's challenges. We just haven't had the resources. You've had the resources. You haven't had the will. Catherine took a seat at the table. Mr. Sullivan, tell me what you'd do about Idaho. Jack felt every eye on him again, but this time it was different. Catherine wasn't testing him. She was giving him a platform. The question was whether he was ready to use it. I'd start with the data. Interview workers, review maintenance logs, assess equipment condition. Find out what's actually causing the efficiency drop. Is it mechanical failure, training issues, morale problems? Then I'd create a prioritized action plan with measurable targets and a realistic timeline. How long would this assessment take? 1 week on site? Maybe less if people are honest about what's happening. And if they're not honest? Jack thought about the past 3 years, about all the times people had made assumptions about him based on his situation. Then I'll look at what the numbers say instead of what people claim. Data doesn't lie. It just takes effort to read it correctly. Catherine nodded. Marcus, arrange travel for Mr. Sullivan. He leaves tomorrow. Patricia, I want you to brief him this afternoon on Idaho's history. Helen, pull together equipment maintenance records going back 2 years. She stood. And everyone in this room needs to understand something clearly. Mr. Sullivan is here because I hired him. Yes, but he stays because of what he can do. I suggest you stop testing whether he belongs and start helping him succeed. Questions? No one had questions. Catherine left as quickly as she'd arrived, and the room slowly exhaled. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice carefully controlled. Well, I suppose that settles the question of where you stand with the CEO. It settles that she expects results, same as she expects from all of you. Jack closed his tablet. I'm not here to make enemies or prove superiority. I'm here to do a job. If you want to help, great. If not, stay out of my way and let me work. Patricia's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but something closer to respect. You've got nerve. I'll give you that. Most people wouldn't call out senior leadership in their first meeting. Most people probably have better survival instincts than me. But I've got a daughter who watches everything I do. I can't teach her to be brave if I'm not willing to do it myself. Helen Pierce actually laughed. Fair enough. Look, Sullivan, you're right about Idaho. We all knew it was a problem. We just didn't know how to fix it without making it a bigger mess. Maybe that's because you were thinking about it wrong. Sometimes the biggest messes require the simplest solutions. Show up, listen, fix what's broken. Not everything needs a committee or a strategic plan. Some things just need someone willing to do the work. The meeting wrapped up 20 minutes later with more cooperation than Jack had expected. Patricia actually shook his hand on the way out. Helen offered to grab coffee sometime. Marcus remained distant but no longer openly hostile. Progress, Jack thought. Small, tentative progress. Back in his office, Jennifer was waiting with lunch, a sandwich and soup from the cafeteria. Ms. Wade thought you might forget to eat. She's not wrong. Jack realized he'd skipped breakfast in his nervousness. Thank you. How was the meeting? Honest. They don't trust me yet. Some of them actively resent me, but at least we're not pretending otherwise. Jennifer's smile was knowing. That's better than most new hires get. Usually the resentment stays hidden for months. She set down a folder. Idaho facility information. Patricia will brief you at 4, but this will get you started. Jack spent his lunch reading about a manufacturing plant that had once been Wade Industries' flagship operation. Built in 1987, expanded in the 90s, employing 230 people in a town of 4,000. The kind of place where the factory was the heartbeat of the entire community. And now it was dying slowly from neglect and absent leadership. At 3 o'clock, Jack knocked on Catherine's office door. She called for him to enter, and he found her standing at her window, looking out over the city. How's your first day? Her tone carried genuine interest. Challenging, eye-opening, exactly what I expected, and nothing like I imagined. Your team is talented but cautious. They're waiting for me to fail. Some of them are hoping I'll fail. I know. Does that bother you? Jack considered the question. It bothers me that they're wasting energy on hoping instead of working. But their opinion of me isn't something I can control. All I can do is show up and do the job. Catherine turned to face him. The Idaho facility is a test. You understand that, right? I'm sending you to the worst situation we have, and everyone is going to watch to see how you handle it. Because if I can fix Idaho, they'll have to take me seriously. Exactly. But it's more than that. Idaho matters to me personally. My father opened that plant. It was his pride and joy, proof that Wade Industries could succeed in small-town America, that we could provide good jobs in places other companies abandoned. Her voice softened. Watching it decline has felt like watching his legacy crumble. I need someone who cares enough to save it. Not for me, but for the 230 people whose livelihoods depend on it. What if I can't? What if the problems are too deep or the solutions too expensive? Then you tell me honestly, and we make hard decisions together. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're going to go to Idaho and see what everyone else missed, that the facility's problems aren't mechanical or financial, they're human. People stopped caring because no one cared about them. Fix that, and everything else follows. Jack thought about his apartment, about the way it had started feeling like home once he and Sophie had arranged their few possessions with care, about how a place reflected the people in it, and how neglect wasn't just visible in broken equipment, but in broken spirits. I'll do my best. I know you will. That's why you're going. Catherine pulled up a calendar. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. flight. You'll have full authority to implement immediate fixes, equipment purchases, staffing changes, whatever you deem necessary within reason. Jennifer will give you procurement codes and emergency contact numbers. Questions? Just one. Why me? You could have sent Marcus or Patricia, people with more experience, more authority, more credibility with the workers. Catherine smiled, but it was sad. Because Marcus and Patricia see problems through spreadsheets. They'd arrive with clipboards and cost analyses and recommendations that look perfect on paper, but ignore the reality of people's lives. You see problems through the lens of someone who's lived them. That makes all the difference. The Idaho facility looked worse than the reports had suggested. Jack stood in the parking lot at 7 Thursday morning, having driven from the Boise airport through country roads that wound past farmland and scattered houses, and stared at what was supposed to be Wade Industries' flagship manufacturing plant. The building itself was solid, red brick and steel built to last, but everything around it spoke of slow decay. Cracked pavement with weeds pushing through, faded paint on the loading docks, a sign near the entrance that read, "Safety First," with 2 letters missing. This was what happened when people stopped caring, when corporate offices in gleaming towers decided that some problems were too distant to matter. Jack grabbed his briefcase and walked toward the main entrance, his breath visible in the cold morning air. Inside, the reception area was clean but tired. Furniture from the 90s, walls that needed fresh paint, a coffee maker that had seen better decades. A woman in her 50s sat behind the desk, looking up with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many corporate visitors promise change that never came. Help you? Her tone suggested she already knew the answer and didn't expect much. Jack Sullivan, I'm here from the Portland office to meet with Tom Henderson. You're the new guy Catherine sent. The woman's voice indicated she'd already categorized him alongside every other disappointing assessment team. Tom's expecting you. Through those doors, take the stairs down, follow the noise. Thank you, Ms. Karen. Just Karen. She returned to her computer screen, dismissing him. Jack found the stairs and descended into the heart of the facility. The noise hit him first. Machinery running at inconsistent rhythms, the clank of metal that suggested loose fittings, voices raised over the mechanical din. Then the smell, oil and heat, and something acrid that spoke of equipment pushed past its limits. The factory floor stretched away in organized chaos. Assembly lines ran in parallel rows, workers moving through practiced motions that carried the weight of repetition. But Jack's trained eye caught the problems immediately. A conveyor belt that stuttered every few seconds, a welding station where the operator had to kick the equipment to keep it running, safety gear that looked functional but outdated, workers whose body language screamed exhaustion and resignation. A man in his early 60s approached, wiping oil-stained hands on a rag. He was built like someone who'd spent decades on factory floors, broad shoulders, calloused hands, eyes that missed nothing. You Sullivan? Yes, sir. You must be Tom Henderson. Facility supervisor. Been here 32 years. Tom's handshake was firm, testing. Catherine called yesterday, said you were coming to help. That true, or are you just another suit collecting information for a report nobody reads? I'm here to fix what's broken. Whether that makes me different from the others, you'll have to decide for yourself. Tom grunted, something that might have been approval. Fair enough. Come on, I'll show you around and you can tell me what you see. They walked the factory floor for 2 hours. Tom pointed out problems with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd cataloged every failure for years. The injection molding machines that ran hot because cooling systems needed $45,000 replacement. The ventilation that barely functioned, making summer work dangerous. 3 workers hospitalized in the past 2 years. The electrical panels that occasionally sparked, terrifying everyone, but $90,000 to fix properly. The conveyor on line 3 that had been stuttering for 8 months, productivity down 15%. The list went on and on, each issue building on the last until Jack understood why efficiency had dropped to 78%. How many safety incidents last month? Jack asked as they paused near a packaging station. Officially 4. Unofficially, Tom's jaw tightened. Probably double that. People don't report minor injuries anymore because they've learned nothing changes. Why fill out paperwork when corporate just files it away? Because every incident matters. Because minor injuries become major ones. Jack stopped, recognizing the futility of lecturing someone who already knew. Show me the incident reports. All of them, official and unofficial. Why? You planning to fire people for not reporting? I'm planning to understand what's actually happening so I can fix it. Jack pulled out his tablet. Tom, I know you don't trust me yet. I know you've seen people like me before and they've disappointed you. But I need you to understand something. I'm not here to write reports or make recommendations that die in committee meetings. Catherine gave me full authority to implement immediate fixes. That means if something needs replacing, I can authorize it. If someone needs additional training, I can arrange it. If management is the problem, I can address it. Tom studied him for a long moment. Full authority? Within reason? Yes. Define reason. Anything that improves safety, increases efficiency, or directly impacts worker welfare, I can approve on site. Anything over $500,000 or involving facility-wide restructuring needs Catherine's sign-off, but she told me to call her directly if I need it. Jack gestured at the factory floor. What would you fix first if money wasn't the constraint? Tom didn't hesitate. The ventilation system. It's been inadequate for 5 years. Summer heat makes the floor dangerous. We've had 3 workers pass out in the last 2 years. 1 needed hospitalization. Corporate keeps saying it's too expensive to replace. How much? $180,000 for a proper industrial system that meets modern standards. Jack pulled out his phone and called Catherine. She answered on the second ring. Sullivan, how's Idaho? Worse than reported. The ventilation system is a safety hazard. I need approval for a 180 replacement. Silence on the line, then, done. Send me the specifications and I'll have procurement start the paperwork today. What else? I'll know more after I've been through everything. But Tom here has been cataloging problems for years. I suspect there's a list longer than my arm. Then work through the list. Fix what needs fixing. Keep me updated. Catherine paused. And Sullivan, thank you for calling immediately instead of sitting on it. She hung up. Jack looked at Tom, whose expression had shifted from skepticism to something closer to shock. She just approved it, on a 2-minute phone call. Get me the specifications for the system you need, and it'll be ordered today. Tom's weathered face worked through several emotions. Just like that. Just like that. Now show me what else needs attention. By lunchtime, Jack had a list of 23 critical issues, 6 of which needed immediate attention, and the rest scheduled for the following month. He'd authorized equipment repairs totaling $90,000, ordered replacement parts for the injection molding machines, and scheduled safety training for the entire facility. Tom had called a lunch meeting in the break room, and word had spread. When Jack arrived, 40 workers were waiting, a mix of assembly line operators, machinists, quality inspectors, and maintenance crew. They watched him with the same weary skepticism Karen had shown, the look of people who'd stopped believing in rescue. Most of you know who I am by now. I'm Jack Sullivan, operations manager from Portland. Catherine Wade sent me here to assess the facility and implement improvements. I've been walking the floor with Tom all morning, and I've seen enough to understand why you're frustrated. Frustrated. A woman in her 30s with grease-stained coveralls spoke up. That's corporate speak for, we know you're miserable, but we're not going to do anything about it. We've heard it before. You're right. Frustrated is too mild. You're working with failing equipment in unsafe conditions while corporate has ignored you for years. That's not frustration. That's abandonment. Jack pulled out his tablet. This morning, I authorized a 180 ventilation system replacement. It'll be installed within 6 weeks. I also approved equipment repairs, replacement parts, and safety training. That's day 1. Tomorrow, I'll tackle the next set of problems. The room had gone silent. You're serious? The woman who'd spoken stared at him. Completely. Tom, tell them about the phone call. Tom stood, his voice carrying that same shocked disbelief. He called Catherine Wade directly, explained the ventilation problem. She approved the expense in 2 minutes. No committee, no review process, no bureaucratic runaround. Just done. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A young man in the back raised his hand. What about the conveyor system? Line 3 has been running rough for 8 months. Added to the list. Maintenance team will assess it this afternoon, and if it needs replacement rather than repair, I'll authorize it. Jack looked around the room. Here's what I need you to understand. I'm not here to tour the facility and leave. I'm staying the entire week, working alongside you, understanding every system and every problem. And I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. Some of these issues are going to take months to fully resolve. But starting today, you're not being ignored anymore. Why? Why should we believe you? This from an older man with gray hair and suspicious eyes. We've had 3 assessment teams come through in 2 years. They all promised help. None of them delivered. Because those teams didn't have authority. They could only make recommendations. I can make decisions. Jack met the man's gaze. But you're right to be skeptical. Don't believe my words. Watch my actions. Judge me by what actually changes, not by what I promise will change. A woman near the front spoke up, her voice tired. What about staffing? We're running short on 2 shifts. Maintenance is down 3 people. Quality assurance lost 2 inspectors last month. You going to fix that too? How many positions are vacant? Tom consulted a clipboard. 7 across all departments. HR has been searching for candidates for 6 months. Jack pulled up his phone again. Jennifer, it's Sullivan. I need HR to prioritize Idaho facility hiring. 7 vacant positions. Send me the job descriptions and I'll review them today. I want candidates interviewed within 2 weeks and positions filled within a month. He paused, listening. I don't care what HR's timeline is. Tell them Catherine approved it. Make it happen. He ended the call and looked at the assembled workers. Hiring timeline is now my problem. Questions? The questions came rapid fire after that. Equipment issues, scheduling problems, training gaps, safety concerns that had been dismissed by previous managers. Jack took notes on everything, asking for details, pushing for specifics, refusing to accept vague answers. By the time the lunch period ended, his tablet was full of action items, and his mind was full of the kind of complex problem-solving he'd been trained for, but hadn't practiced in years. As workers filed back to their stations, Tom pulled him aside. You know what you just did? Listen to people who know this facility better than I ever will? You gave them hope. Dangerous thing, hope. If you can't deliver, You'll have done more damage than all the previous assessment teams combined. Then I'd better deliver. Jack looked out at the factory floor. Tom, I need your honesty. Is there anything here that's beyond saving? Anything I should know about that's being hidden? Tom hesitated, then gestured toward his office, a cramped space with a window overlooking the floor. Once inside with the door closed, he pulled out a folder from a locked drawer. Shipping manifests from the past 6 months. Take a look at the discrepancies. Jack opened the folder and immediately understood why Tom had locked it away. The manifests showed consistent variances. Products shipped that didn't match production records. Delivery confirmations for orders that should have exceeded the facility's capacity. Inventory numbers that didn't reconcile with actual stock. Someone's been falsifying records. His voice was quiet. Not someone, multiple someones, with cooperation from management. Tom's expression was grim. The previous facility manager, David Carlson, had an understanding with several of our distributors. They'd report higher production numbers than we actually achieved, making the facility look better on paper while skimming the difference. When he retired, his assistant manager took over the scheme. Who's the assistant manager? Guy named Derek Morris. He's been here 15 years. Thinks he runs the place. When corporate didn't promote him to facility manager after Carlson left, he got bitter. Decided if they wouldn't recognize his value officially, he'd extract it unofficially. Jack felt cold anger settling in his gut. He's been stealing from the company while workers deal with failing equipment and safety hazards. Him and at least 2 others on the management team. I've suspected it for a year, but couldn't prove it without access to the full distribution network data. And I sure as hell wasn't going to report it to corporate without proof. Last thing I need is Morris finding out I'm the one who talked. Does anyone else know about this? Karen suspects. Maybe a couple of the older workers who've been here long enough to notice the patterns. But everyone's scared of Morris. He's got connections in town, friends in the county government. Cross him, and you might find yourself out of a job with no prospects in a town this small. Jack photographed every page in the folder with his phone. I need the distribution network data. Can you get me access? Morris controls those systems. He's the only one with admin privileges. Not anymore. Jack called Catherine again, explained the situation in careful terms, and within 20 minutes had full network access to every system in the facility. By mid-afternoon, he'd traced the fraud through 6 months of manifests, identifying approximately $300,000 in stolen inventory. The evidence was clear, the pattern undeniable. Derek Morris had been running a sophisticated theft operation, using his position to falsify records while workers struggled with equipment that desperately needed the money being siphoned away. At 4 o'clock, Jack called Morris to the supervisor's office. The man who arrived was in his late 40s, well-dressed by factory standards, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd gotten away with something for a long time. Sullivan, right? Heard you've been causing quite a stir today, authorizing all kinds of spending. Hope you know what you're doing. Corporate doesn't like surprises. Sit down, Derek. Jack waited until Morris was seated, then placed printed copies of the falsified manifests on the desk. I've spent the afternoon reviewing distribution records. Found some interesting discrepancies. Morris's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Discrepancies happen. Clerical errors, system glitches. Nothing unusual. These aren't clerical errors. These are systematic falsifications designed to hide inventory theft. $300,000 over 6 months. Probably more if I go back further. Jack pushed the papers closer. The pattern is clear. You've been reporting production numbers that don't match actual output, then pocketing the difference through your distributor contacts. That's a serious accusation. You better have proof. because making claims like that without evidence is slander. I have 6 months of manifests, distribution confirmations, production logs, and inventory records. All of it showing the same pattern, all of it pointing directly at you. Jack pulled up his tablet. I've already sent copies to Catherine Wade and our legal department. You're done here, Derek. The only question is whether you walk out quietly or in handcuffs. Morris stood slowly, his friendly mask cracking. You have no idea what you're doing. I've been here 15 years. I have friends, people who matter in this town. You're some Portland outsider who's been here half a day. You think you can just... I think I can stop theft. I think I can protect workers who've been suffering while you lined your pockets. And I think you're going to leave this facility immediately, before I call the sheriff. Jack stood as well, meeting Morris's anger with steady calm. Security is already at your desk packing your personal items. Your access codes have been revoked. You're escorted off the property today. Catherine will never back this. She doesn't know how things work here, how... Jack's phone rang. He put it on speaker. Catherine's voice cut through the room like ice. Mr. Sullivan, I've reviewed the evidence you sent. It's damning. Derek Morris is terminated, effective immediately. I'm having our legal team contact local law enforcement to pursue criminal charges. She paused. Mr. Morris, if you're listening, Wade Industries will recover every dollar you stole, plus damages. I suggest you hire a good attorney. The call ended. Morris stared at the phone, then at Jack, his face cycling through rage and fear. You're making a mistake. This facility runs because of relationships I've built. Without me, without you, this facility gets honest management and equipment that actually works. Tom Henderson appeared in the doorway with 2 security guards. Derek, let's make this easy. Your stuff is boxed. These gentlemen will walk you out. Morris left, still protesting, still threatening. His voice echoed down the hallway until it faded into nothing. Tom closed the door and leaned against it. Jesus, you've been here 8 hours. Sometimes 8 hours is all it takes to identify a cancer. Jack felt the adrenaline starting to fade, leaving exhaustion behind. Who's next in the management chain? That would be Susan Ortiz, production coordinator. She's solid. Been trying to keep things running despite Morris's interference. If anyone can step up temporarily, it's her. Get her in here. And Tom, thank you for trusting me with this. I know it wasn't easy. Easier than watching this place die while someone steals from it. Tom opened the door. For what it's worth, you just became either the most popular or most hated person in this facility. Possibly both. Word spread quickly. By the time Susan Ortiz arrived, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense efficiency, workers were gathering in clusters, talking in hushed tones. Jack could see the reactions dividing clearly. Relief from those who'd suffered under Morris's management, uncertainty from those who'd benefited from looking the other way, and calculation from the 2 other managers Tom had suspected of involvement. Jack spent an hour with Susan reviewing the facility's actual production capacity and creating realistic targets. Then he called an all-hands meeting for the next morning, knowing he needed to address what had happened before rumors turned toxic. He worked until 9 p.m., going through personnel files, identifying everyone who'd reported to Morris, flagging concerns for further investigation. When he finally returned to his hotel, a modest chain property that was the only option in town, his phone was full of messages. 3 from Catherine, approving additional expenditures and expressing satisfaction with his handling of Morris. 2 from Jennifer, coordinating logistics for the equipment orders. One from Patricia back in Portland, grudgingly acknowledging that his instincts had been correct. And one from Sophie, sent through Mrs. Walsh's phone. "Miss you, Daddy. Mrs. Walsh made cookies. Save Idaho." Jack smiled, despite his exhaustion, and called her. She answered breathlessly, clearly having run to grab the phone. "Daddy, Mrs. Walsh said you're fixing a factory. Is it true?" "I'm trying, baby. It's complicated work." "Are the people there nice?" Jack thought about Tom's cautious trust, Susan's competent professionalism, Morris's betrayal, the workers' wary hope. Some of them are. Some of them need to learn to be. But we're making progress. "I told my class about you today, about how you save people and fix things. My teacher said you sound very brave." "Your teacher is very kind, but I'm not brave, Sophie. I'm just doing what needs doing." "That's what brave means, Daddy. Doing things even when they're hard." Her voice was matter-of-fact, the simple wisdom of children who hadn't yet learned to doubt. "I'm proud of you." After they hung up, Jack sat in his generic hotel room and felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper. He'd fired a man today, exposed corruption, authorized hundreds of thousands in repairs, and given 230 people reason to hope things might actually improve. Any one of those actions could backfire. The consequences could cascade in ways he couldn't predict. But Sophie was proud of him, and Catherine trusted him. And somewhere in this small Idaho town, workers would go home tonight believing that maybe, finally, someone actually cared about their safety and their futures. That had to be worth the risk. Friday morning's all-hands meeting filled the cafeteria beyond capacity. Workers stood along the walls, sat on tables, crowded the doorway. Jack stood at the front with Tom and Susan flanking him, facing a sea of faces that ranged from hopeful to hostile. Most of you know what happened yesterday. Derek Morris was terminated for theft and fraud. Evidence has been turned over to law enforcement. 2 other managers are under investigation and have been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. I want to be clear. This isn't a witch hunt, but it is accountability. People who steal from this company while you work with failing equipment aren't going to be protected. "What about the rest of us?" a man in the back called out. "Morris had friends. Some of us might have looked the other way on things. Are we all going to lose our jobs?" If you stole, yes. If you actively participated in fraud, yes. If you simply worked here while Morris ran his operation, no. I'm not interested in punishing people for not being whistleblowers. Jack scanned the crowd. But going forward, the culture changes. If you see safety violations, you report them. If you see theft or fraud, you report it. If you see anything that puts workers at risk or hurts this facility, you speak up. That's not optional. Easy to say from Portland. Hard numbers matter more than sentiment when you're making decisions about our livelihoods, someone muttered. I'm not from Portland originally. I'm from a town smaller than this one, where the factory closing meant everyone I knew lost their jobs. My father worked 30 years on a manufacturing floor before the company decided it was cheaper to move production. I watched what that did to him, to our family, to our community. Jack's voice carried the weight of old pain. So when I say I understand what this facility means to you, I'm not making corporate speeches. I'm telling you, I've lived it. The room shifted. People who'd been skeptical leaned forward. The hostility in some faces softened to attention. Susan Ortiz is now acting facility manager. Tom Henderson continues as supervisor. Together, they're going to help me rebuild this place into what it should have been all along. That means honest reporting, safe working conditions, and management that actually cares whether you make it home in one piece. Jack pulled up his tablet. The ventilation system is ordered. Conveyor repairs start Monday. New safety equipment arrives next week. We're hiring for 7 vacant positions, and I'll be personally reviewing candidates to make sure we get people who fit this facility's needs, not just whoever corporate thinks is convenient. How long are you staying? A woman near the front asked. Through next Friday. After that, I'll be back monthly to ensure progress continues. But I'm not going to micromanage from Portland. Susan and Tom know this facility better than I ever will. My job is to give them resources and authority. Their job is to run this place correctly. The meeting lasted 90 minutes, with questions ranging from specific equipment concerns to broader worries about job security. Jack answered everything honestly, refusing to make promises he couldn't keep, but also refusing to sugarcoat the challenges ahead. When it finally ended, Tom pulled him aside. The 2 managers on administrative leave. They're scared. Might try to retaliate somehow. Let them try. Everything I've done is documented and approved. If they want to make noise, they'll just draw more attention to their own problems. But Tom's warning proved prophetic. That afternoon, Jack received a call from someone identifying himself as Councilman Robert Morrison, his voice carrying the smooth authority of small-town politics. Mr. Sullivan, I understand you've made some dramatic changes at the Wade facility. Derek Morris is a friend of mine, and frankly, I'm concerned about the way he was treated. Firing a respected member of our community without proper process seems hasty. Mr. Morris was terminated for documented theft and fraud. The evidence has been provided to law enforcement. If you have concerns about the process, I suggest you speak with Wade Industries' legal department. I'm speaking with you. Derek has connections in this town, people who value his contributions to the community. Treating him like a criminal based on some paperwork discrepancies is going to reflect poorly on Wade Industries. Morrison's tone hardened. The $300,000 he stole isn't a discrepancy. It's a crime. And if you're suggesting I should have ignored it because he has friends, then you're part of the problem this facility has been dealing with. Jack kept his voice level. Councilman Morrison, I'm here to do a job. If that makes me unpopular with certain people, I can live with that. What I can't live with is allowing theft to continue while workers suffer. You're making enemies, Mr. Sullivan. In a town this size, that's not wise. Then I'll be unwise. Have a good day, Councilman. Jack hung up and immediately called Catherine to brief her on the conversation. She listened without interrupting, then sighed. Small-town politics. Morris probably has half the county government in his pocket through favors and connections. They're going to push back. Should I be worried about them? No. About the facility workers feeling pressured by community members to defend Morris? Maybe. Watch for that. Catherine paused. Sullivan, you're doing exactly what I sent you to do. Don't let threats, subtle or otherwise, change your approach. Wade Industries has resources to fight whatever Morrison and his friends try to throw at us. The weekend brought unexpected complications. Several workers called in sick on Saturday, a shift that should have had full staffing suddenly short. Tom suspected pressure from Morris's supporters, but couldn't prove it. Jack spent Saturday on the factory floor himself, working alongside the reduced crew, learning their jobs firsthand. By Sunday, the atmosphere had shifted again. Word had spread about the new guy from corporate who'd spent an entire shift running machinery and hadn't complained once about the work. When Monday arrived, staffing was back to normal, and something new had appeared in workers' expressions when they looked at him. Respect. The week progressed in a blur of 14-hour days. Equipment repairs continued. The new ventilation system's installation was scheduled. Job candidates were interviewed via video call, with Jack insisting on speaking with each personally. Problems that had festered for years were cataloged, prioritized, and addressed one by one. But beneath the progress, Jack felt the undercurrent of resistance. The 2 managers on administrative leave hadn't returned, but their allies remained. People who'd benefited from the old system and resented the changes. Small acts of sabotage began appearing. Tools went missing. Maintenance schedules got accidentally deleted. Equipment that had been repaired suddenly developed new problems. Tom confirmed it on Thursday night as they reviewed the week's incidents. Someone's trying to make you look bad. Make it seem like your changes are causing more problems than they're solving. Then we document everything and keep moving forward. Jack pulled up the security camera footage that had been one of his first installation orders. And we start catching whoever's responsible. The footage revealed one of Morris's former associates deliberately damaging a conveyor belt motor that had just been repaired. Jack had him escorted off the property Friday morning with the same efficiency Morris had received. By Friday afternoon, as Jack prepared to return to Portland, the facility felt different. Not perfect, far from it. Problems remained that would take months to fully resolve. But the trajectory had changed. Workers moved with more purpose. Safety violations were being reported. Equipment that had been neglected was receiving attention. Susan walked him to his rental car, her expression thoughtful. "You know what you did here? Started fixing what was broken? You gave us permission to expect better, to believe this place matters." She extended her hand. "Thank you for not treating us like we were disposable." "You never were disposable. Someone just forgot to tell you that." Jack shook her hand. "I'll be back in 3 weeks. Keep the progress going. Call me if you need anything, and I mean anything. You have my direct number." The drive to the airport took him past downtown, a collection of storefronts that had seen better decades, a diner that probably served as the town's social center, a high school that fed its graduates directly into factory jobs or military service. This was the America that people forgot existed when they talked about economic progress and corporate success. These were the communities that bore the cost when efficiency meant cutting corners and maximizing profit meant minimizing care. Jack's flight back to Portland gave him time to write his report. Not the sanitized corporate version that made everything sound manageable, but the honest assessment Catherine had asked for. The facility could be saved, but it required sustained investment and management oversight. The cultural problems ran deeper than equipment failures, and the resistance from local power structures meant this fight wasn't over. When he landed, Sophie and Mrs. Walsh were waiting at arrivals. Sophie ran to him, and he scooped her up, ignoring his protesting shoulder that still hadn't fully healed from the bridge. "Did you save Idaho?" "I started to. Still more work to do." He set her down. "But yeah, I think we're going to save it." Catherine called that night after Sophie was asleep. "I read your report. It's more honest than anything corporate has received in years." "Is that good or bad?" "It's necessary. The board meeting is Tuesday. I'm presenting your findings and recommendations. They're not going to like the price tag. $2 million over 18 months to fully restore the facility to proper condition. I know it's a lot, but it's less than we'd lose if the facility closes or continues declining." "You made that case clearly." Catherine's voice softened. "You did good work this week, Sullivan. Better than I expected, and my expectations were already high." After they hung up, Ethan stood at his apartment window, looking out at Portland's lights. He'd been operations manager for 1 week. In that time, he'd exposed corruption, fired corrupt management, authorized hundreds of thousands in repairs, given 230 workers reason to hope, and made enemies among small-town power brokers who weren't used to being challenged. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like he was finally doing what he was meant to do. His phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Workers voted unanimously to name the new ventilation system the Sullivan System. Thought you should know. Jack smiled in the darkness. He'd spent 3 years feeling invisible, believing the world had forgotten people like him existed. Now his name would be on equipment keeping Idaho workers safe. It wasn't the kind of recognition that came with awards or promotions. It was better. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 Tuesday morning, which gave Jack exactly enough time to drop Sophie at school, change into his best suit, and arrive at Wade Industries with his stomach in knots. Catherine had asked him to attend, to present his findings directly to the people who controlled the company's purse strings. It was an honor and a test, and Jack understood that how he performed in the next 2 hours would determine whether Idaho got the resources it needed or became another casualty of corporate cost-cutting. Jennifer met him at the elevator with coffee and a sympathetic smile. Board meetings are theater, remember that. They're going to challenge you, question your numbers, ask why they should invest millions in a facility that's been declining for years. Don't take it personally. What if they decide it's not worth saving? Then Catherine will override them. She has controlling interest, but she'd prefer their support, which means you need to make them believe Idaho matters. Jennifer handed him a tablet with his presentation loaded. You've got this. You walked into a corrupt facility and fixed it in a week. Talking to executives should be easy by comparison. It wasn't easy. The boardroom was all dark wood and intimidating formality, with 12 people seated around a table that probably cost more than Jack's annual salary. Catherine sat at the head, immaculate in a charcoal suit, her expression giving nothing away. The others were older men and women who'd built careers on quarterly reports and shareholder value, whose connection to manufacturing floors existed only through spreadsheets. Marcus Foley was there, looking uncomfortable in a way that suggested he knew what was coming. Patricia Torres sat beside him, her expression carefully neutral. The rest were strangers whose nameplates proclaimed titles like Chief Financial Officer and Director of Strategic Planning. Catherine opened with a summary of Idaho's situation, then turned the floor over to Jack. He stood, feeling every eye assess him, judge him, find him wanting before he'd even spoken. 3 weeks ago, the Idaho facility was operating at 78% efficiency, with a rising accident rate and declining employee morale. Management had been falsifying production records while stealing inventory. Workers were using equipment that should have been replaced years ago. The facility was dying, and nobody with the power to fix it seemed to care. He pulled up images on the screen: the cracked parking lot, the outdated safety equipment, the machinery held together with improvised repairs. Then the falsified manifests, the evidence of theft, the documented safety violations. In my first week on site, I terminated the assistant facility manager for fraud, placed 2 others on administrative leave, and authorized immediate repairs totaling $270,000. The ventilation system replacement will cost an additional $180,000. Full facility restoration requires $2 million over 18 months. A man Jack didn't recognize, the nameplate read James Whitmore, CFO, spoke up immediately. $2 million is a significant investment for a facility that's been underperforming. What's our return timeline? 18 months to reach 95% efficiency, 3 years to full ROI based on increased production capacity and reduced accident-related costs. And if we simply close the facility and consolidate production elsewhere? Jack had expected this question, but still felt anger flash through him. You'd save the $2 million investment. You'd also put 230 people out of work in a town of 4,000, destroy a community that depends on that facility, and lose the institutional knowledge of workers who've been there for decades. The hidden costs of closure, unemployment insurance, potential lawsuits, damage to Wade Industries' reputation in rural markets would likely exceed the investment you're trying to avoid. That's speculative. Whitmore's tone was dismissive. Hard numbers matter more than sentiment. Then let's talk hard numbers. Jack pulled up a new slide. Idaho's facility at full efficiency can produce 15% more output than our Oregon plant at 30% lower labor costs. The building is paid for. The workforce is trained. The location provides strategic access to distribution networks in 6 states. Closing it means losing that advantage permanently. Investing in it means gaining a competitive edge that compounds annually. Patricia leaned forward. Your report mentions ongoing resistance from local power structures. Councilman Morrison and others with connections to the terminated managers. How do we address that? We don't negotiate with people protecting corruption. Morrison called me trying to intimidate me into going easy on Morris. I declined and reported the call to Catherine. If he or anyone else wants to make trouble, let them. We have documentation of everything. Jack met Patricia's eyes. The only way to change a toxic culture is to refuse to participate in it. That means standing firm even when it's uncomfortable. Marcus cleared his throat. Mr. Sullivan, nobody here doubts your intentions, but you've been in this role 3 weeks. Some of us have decades of experience watching promising initiatives fail because the person leading them didn't understand the full complexity of what they were attempting. How do we know this isn't another well-meaning effort that collapses once you're not personally present? It was a fair question, and Jack respected Marcus for asking it directly. You don't know. You're taking a calculated risk based on limited data, but consider what we do know. In 1 week, I identified and terminated a theft operation that had been running for at least 6 months. I implemented immediate safety improvements that workers have already noticed. I hired a competent acting facility manager and gave her the authority to continue making progress. The question isn't whether I can fix Idaho personally. It's whether I've set systems in place that allow Idaho to fix itself. And have you? This from Catherine, her first direct question of the meeting. I believe so. Susan Ortiz is capable and committed. Tom Henderson has the workers' trust. The corrupt management is gone. Equipment repairs are scheduled. Safety protocols are being enforced. The foundation is solid. What Idaho needs now is consistent investment and oversight, not heroic intervention. Silence settled over the room. Catherine stood. I've heard enough. The board will vote on the proposed Idaho investment package, $2.5 million over 18 months with quarterly progress reviews. Those in favor? 8 hands went up, including Marcus's and Patricia's. 4 abstained. None voted against. The motion carries. Catherine's smile was slight but genuine. Mr. Sullivan, you're authorized to implement your recommendations. Quarterly reviews begin in 3 months. Don't make me regret this.